This next workshop of the.
Yeah. Me too. That conversation will go so right.
Good morning, Joanna's phone.
Oh, we just lost her.
Good morning, John.
Wait until then start talking transportation, and we finally go midnight, grab a arm, so. We're running into some challenges, real. It was great. Yeah. So it's from page to picture. Oh.
Good morning, Mayor Burton.
Good morning.
Skip, we need one more for quorum.
All right.
We called the recording until
Franklin Council of Governments Board of Directors to order on Friday, February 21st at 10 o'clock. And we'll start with the convening statement, please. All right, is that the end of the recording?
it is.
Great, thank you. Our next agenda item then is roll call. Lacey, would you do a roll call, please?
Yes, so Ben-Franklin Transit,
Yep, present.
Benton County,
Yes, present.
okay, and who is that with Benton County?
That was Benton City.
That was
County
county,
was
not
not
here.
here.
Wondering, okay, and then Glen Burton with Benton City, right? Yes. City of Connell.
I think I finally unmuted myself. Lee Barrow.
Thank you, Lee. City of Kennewick.
John Trumbull present.
Okay. City of Pasco.
Earl Scrim here.
City of Prosser.
Maricela Sanchez here.
Thank you. City of Richland.
Joanna Jones here.
City of West Richland.
Kate Moran, present.
Franklin County. Port of Benton.
Roy Keck.
Port of Kennel.
Kip Novakovic.
And Port of Pasco.
Vicky Gordon.
And Wattstadt.
Brian White.
And we do have a quorum. Thank you. Lacey, do we have any guests that we need to introduce? Are there any guests online or in person?
Yes, we do have a guest in the room, from the city of Kennewick.
John Galley.
John Galley, who will be presenting for us.
Right, welcome.
We also
All right.
have Aaron Erdman is here with us from the city as well. We do have online Richard Bloom, our alternate from Benton-Franklin Transit. It looks like Kelly Dolan from Washtenaw has also joined us or is joining us. We've got Gretel, it looks like Gretel and Kelly are maybe in the waiting room. For point of clarification for just primaries and alternates, Gretel has just joined the meeting as the primary for City of Kennewick. So John, we have you now as a guest for our meeting. And the same with Benton-Franklin Transit. Thomas is our primary and Richard is our alternate. So Thomas will be our voting member for BFT.
Michelle, thank you for that. Any other guests we need to recognize? Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. Our next agenda item is the Pledge of Allegiance. And if you'd all rise, I'd like to ask Commissioner Keck to lead us in the pledge, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag.
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Roy.
Thank you.
Our next agenda item is approval of the agenda. And I would just like to add that the approval of the agenda as presented would be amended to include a resolution on agenda item 10AI. Can we have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
Vicky Gordon, I would move to approve the agenda as amended.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you. Any discussion by the board? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the agenda as amended signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed say no. The agenda is approved. Thank you. Our next agenda item is public comment. It's an opportunity for anyone from the public to address the board on anything on the agenda or anything you'd like to make us aware of. We just ask that you state your name, city of residence for the record, and limit your comments to maybe 3 minutes. Would anyone like to make a public comment at this time? All right. Then our next agenda item is a presentation by the city of Kennewick. And Aaron, would you like to introduce this, please?
Yes, I would. We have the city of Kennewick and we have John Cowling here, who is the Public Works Director. John joined the city in 2017 and then was promoted to Deputy Public Works Director in 2022 and then was recently promoted to Director of Public Works in 2024. Yes, I got that off your Wikipedia page.
Welcome, John.
Thanks, Aaron. Well, thank you everybody for the opportunity to come today. As Aaron said, I'm John Galley, Public Works Director for the city of Kennewick. We wanted to highlight 2 projects today that have really risen as our top 2 projects that we're seeking funding for. Any way we can get funding at this point. So thanks for the opportunity for speaking today. Let's see. First project we have is probably no surprise. It's the Columbia Center Boulevard Improvement Project. Columbia Center Boulevard is, as you know, the busiest city corridor within the city of Kennewick with over 40,000 average daily traffic per vehicle and freight, and obviously acts as a regional economic corridor. The project we're looking at doing would construct an additional lane, so 3 lanes each direction, 1 northbound and 1 eastbound, on top of what we already have, as well as improvements at the signalized intersections of Grand Ridge Boulevard and Okanagan Ave. We would include replacing those signals as well as optimization of the signals and then planning for interconnection of the entire corridor. We're currently working with Benton-PUD and NOAANET to actually get fiber optic to every signal along this corridor by this summer. So once that happens, we can have the entire corridor interconnected and coordinated with the help of traffic and delays. Obviously, this project helps support economic drivers along the corridor, which include this entertainment district, which is really starting to take off with development now. Columbia Center Mall, and then obviously some big box commercial businesses in that corridor. So looking at the project limits, starting at the south, it begins at Deschutes Avenue. We actually did a signal improvement project last summer to that intersection in anticipation of this project. And then as I stated, along the corridor, we'd be adding a northbound and southbound travel lane. So there's 3 in each direction. And again, improvements at the signals of Grand Ridge and Okanagan. We've been working adamantly on how to maintain left turns into the existing businesses along there with the existing constraints. And so it looks like we're going to be able to successful to keep left turns along the corridor at all but one business closer to the south end of the project. And then at the north end, being at Quinault Avenue, we're actually going to be reconstructing that signal beginning this spring. So that contract was awarded late last year for construction, also in anticipation of this project. One thing I'll mention is we are going to try to provide U-turn locations at all of the signalized intersections, just so we have some better access opportunities should someone miss a left turn, or that's something we see a lot along Columbia Center Boulevard, confusion on where they should turn for certain businesses. So and then the major employers along the corridor, we've got Vista Field, as I mentioned, which is starting to really take off, Fire Station 3, DSHS buildings, Miramar Health, obviously Columbia Center Mall, and then the Three Rivers expansion, which was actually just approved by council on Tuesday for a $71 million expansion to the convention center. And that will provide for a lot larger regional conventions as well as regional sports facilities within the new constructed building. As far as funding, we've already been successful getting around 87,000 towards planning, 580,000 for preliminary engineering, and about 2 million for right-of-way. And as I stated, we're still seeking funding. That would be for construction at about 11.4 million. And we're hoping that construction could begin in the 2027 timeframe. As far as schedule, we're currently in preliminary design, so about 30% complete with design and close to starting with right-of-way plans, so that this summer we can begin with right-of-way appraisals and acquisition. We have money we need to obligate this year, and there should be no problem doing that. The second project we wanted to highlight real quickly is an at-grade rail solution study. Kennewick, like many cities, is built at the junction of historic freight transportation routes, and unfortunately for us, that cuts east-west basically through the center of Kennewick. We have several at-grade crossings, 10 downtown and 2 in central Kennewick. We see delays of up to 20 minutes in some of these grade crossings, obviously cutting off emergency services, traffic delays, and then barriers to economic growth and the related air pollution. We've even had situations where the engineer on the train has maxed out the hours they could drive, and they had to stop the train crossing Edison and Kellogg and wait for another engineer to come drive the train the rest of the way. So it's not just the typical thing we're seeing in Kennewick. So, and obviously with major arterials like that, delays like that are just significant impacts. So along with that, obviously we're seeing increased rail, increased length of rail, and then with obviously proposed projects coming up, that will just increase in the future. So we are looking at potential for grade separation at least one location downtown and one location in central Kennewick to at least alleviate some traffic and provide for emergency services. So this study would take a look at what really is feasible. Obviously downtown Kennewick will be extremely difficult with the existing buildings and infrastructure there. So the study would take a look at every location, what we would affect as far as businesses and property, and then likely downtown would be an undercrossing, and then in central Kennewick, I'm not quite sure, but we're estimating that project to be around $300,000 for it. So this is the location of the downtown crossings. We've got 12 intersections, 10 at-grade crossings. And as you can see, they're kind of all clustered together. So when that gets cut, it doesn't take a long train to completely cut off the downtown area. And you have to travel quite a bit east or west to actually be able to access north or south. And then in central Kennewick, we have crossings at both Kellogg and Edison, which are major arterials, so a lot of traffic. And this is another area we significantly see 20-minute delays, which have significant traffic impacts. And again, traveling east or west quite a distance to just get around it. And I hope you're going in the opposite direction as the train as you're trying to get around it. So that's a quick overview of the projects we wanted to highlight. Mayor Crawford or City Manager Bergman, if you had something you wanted to add, I would offer you the opportunity.
I'm coming. Hello, good morning.
Good morning, Gretel. Do you have something to add?
Well, not really. John's done a pretty good overview. The rail crossings have been a concern for quite a while, and in addition with the freight that cuts through the city of Kennewick specifically. And I know there's a lot of conversations, and I think a lot more conversations being had throughout the region just with our growth, but it's affecting all of our cities in different ways. And then just our grade crossings are concerns, especially, downtown, there's a lot of people still transient, a little more than maybe on the west side, but both Kellogg and Edison are close to schools, Tritech and Kamaikan High School. And those are concerns. I know some of the businesses around those areas are very concerned too about the interaction with young kids, just getting their license, schools, rail, and then obviously emergency services. So these are things we took to Olympia and talked to some of the legislators there too. So we are looking for funding help in different areas. So, but John did a great job.
Good. Thank you for that. Any other questions from the board or comments?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
With the goal of Vista Field and Kennewick being to create a more walkable and people-oriented neighborhood, does widening a major road that already carries large amounts of traffic to accommodate even larger amounts of traffic, is that in any way in conflict with the goals of this adjacent neighborhood that's meant to be more people-oriented?
My opinion, no, because it's actually taking traffic that would try to divert around there in areas potentially like Vista Field around the convention center to avoid congestion. So I could see it actually acting as a better way for people to get through rather than actually congesting roads that are more likely to have pedestrian traffic on it in those areas of Vista Field and around that area. So it should help alleviate that part of everything. I understand your question though. Generally, Columbia Center Boulevard is a high pedestrian area other than maybe some better transit roads.
Any other questions or comments? John, just a question or a comment from me. A long time ago, 25 years ago or so, former Councilman Paul Parrish and I met with BNSF quite a bit about at-grade crossings in downtown Kennewick. And I think there was a study done back then on possibly Fruitland and Benton Street for undergrade crossings. I don't know if you know about that study, but it might be something you may want to take a look at because it was it was a pretty good study.
Well, and you're correct. Fruitland and potentially Washington are the ones that we're thinking maybe have the best potential for undercrossings at this point. Thank you for that.
You bet. Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
Can I just follow up real quick? I think on Kate's comment.
Yeah, go ahead, Gretel.
Because I think that John, I think that the response was really good because there is a lot of cross through traffic to get off of Columbia Center Boulevard. I think on some of those back roads and the rivers or the trail map and things that we're working on, throughout the city, we are looking to improve walkability and biking and things like that throughout the city. But Columbia Center Boulevard is just one of our major arterial roads, and it's not going to become less traveled. The Vista area, the convention center, and some of those areas in there, I think the connectivity is going to be a lot better within those areas, but I don't necessarily think that a lot of that is going to spill over into necessarily the mall area. But if it does, again, improved intersections, improved lights, all of those things are actually still improvements, but we're not going to slow the growth of the Tri-Cities and Kennewick and the amount of commuter traffic that's just going to increase whether you want it to or not. I think it needs to be just taken into account. But anyways.
Great, Gretel, thank you for that. Anybody else? All right, Gretel, everybody, John, thank you so much for your presentation. And we'll move on then to the consent agenda. These are items considered of a routine nature taken by one vote of the board. Any item can be removed by a single member asking for it to be removed, placed further on down the agenda, or tabled for another meeting. Do we need to remove any item from the consent agenda? Hearing none, can we have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
This is Kate Moran. I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thanks, Kate. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Gretel. It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as presented. All four items as shown on your agenda packet or on the screen. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed say no. The consent agenda is approved unanimously. Thank you. We'll move on to reports then. And Aaron, we'll start with you.
Thank you. First, we have our monthly transportation improvement program obligation status update. So this is a monthly update on how well the region is doing at spending our funding. We have an estimated target currently of 9.1 million for all of our SDBG carbon reduction program and transportation alternative program funding. Right now, it is still an estimate. I'm hoping by about this time next month or even into early April, we will be receiving our final WashDOT obligation authority target. And this is tied to something I will be talking about later, but it is based on the continuing resolution with the federal government and their transportation package. So it's not WashDOT's fault that they have not given us the target yet. So as of February, we have 2 projects that have obligated for 3 million, so leaving us about 6 million to reach our regional target. This was included within your board packet. Any questions on this before I move on to my next item?
Board members, any questions of Aaron? All right, hearing none, go ahead, Aaron, move on.
All right, next is the Comprehensive Safety Action Plan CSAP update. So we have released an interactive safety map that you can see on your screen here. This is about pinning where individuals have experienced safety issues and where they would like to see safety improvements. This is a similar type of map that was used by the city of Richland for their pedestrian safety action plan. Staff has been going to many different community outreach events and stakeholder engagement events. We have one coming up this coming Thursday at OBS Lounge. It's a Pins and Poetry event. So if you'd like to express how our region needs to be more safe on our roadway system via poetry, please come and join the event. If you have any questions about the event, you can reach out to Daisy. She is the staff lead for this.
Great, thank you, Aaron. Board members, any questions of Aaron?
Aaron, one comment I would add is that for the board members, if you'd like to share the information on that, the ability to use the pinning survey, it's on the homepage of our website. So we're trying to share that to encourage people in the community to go and add in those locations where they have concerns.
Great, thank you. Anything else? All right, Aaron, move on.
All right. Next is the WashDOT freight data request. WashDOT and the Freight Mobility Investment Board, also known as BIMSIB, are required to create the Freight and Goods Transportation System every 2 years. That's reviewed to FGTS. WashDOT has sent out a request to cities, ports, and counties. We're letting all jurisdictions know that they do not need to take action on this. As we have done our traffic count program, we will fulfill that need and send the data over to WashDOT. So this is just letting you all know. This is part of the benefit that we have. We're doing our traffic count program. We can do this for all of you. But no action is needed. And if you have any specific questions on this, Alex Hall is the point person for this data request.
So does headquarters know it's just coming from you guys?
Yeah.
Or are they expecting it from all of them?
No, we communicate with Wyndon.
Aaron,
Yep.
quick question. So when will this be completed and what is the duration time frame?
Yeah, so it has to be over to WashDOT by the end of June.
Okay.
I'll say there might be give or take a couple of days. However, we already have all of the data on our traffic count portal. It's just putting it onto the specific FGTS network. So the roads that were already on the network, how can they be updated? If you want to look at specific freight data, we can send you our traffic count portal. And then as you click on a specific traffic count location, it pops up what the heavy vehicle percentage is.
Yeah, that might be helpful. I'm just thinking that with Amazon coming more online, it's going to change quite a bit. But I'm also wondering just with the Blue Bridge traffic and then everything kind of being rerouted on the other across the other bridge, those two are taken into account too, right?
It will be roads that are not on WashDOT facilities, so state route 397 and US 395. We don't have traffic counts for that. WashDOT does, and they have their own system for knowing the freight percentages. So anything that is on a local road, so a city of county or county road, we have the percentages for that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, Aaron, go ahead.
All right. As you can see in the room, it's set up a little different. We have a big map on the wall behind us and some art on the wall across from us. This week, the COG hosted a work session called the Road Ahead Regional Transportation Reimagined to identify and prioritize large-scale infrastructure gaps in our regional transportation system. So this is looking forward 50 years, looking forward into the future. What is missing from our entire regional transportation system to make it a complete transportation system? This was a great discussion that was held between almost all of the jurisdictions within our region. And going to the next slide, the results of the meeting are here on the map in front of you. So the idea of a Tri-Cities outer loop is what was prioritized by the group. The bolded projects that you see are the projects that are associated with the Tri-Cities outer loop. It will be moving forward as studying this Tri-Cities outer loop idea, and then these projects will be prioritized based upon the results of the study. In yellow are other projects that were mentioned and identified as regional projects, just not ones that are associated with the Tri-Cities outer loop idea.
And Aaron, I understand that meeting went very, very well. Is that correct?
Yes, it did. It was, we got a new map here in the conference room and it was cool to see for about the first 5 minutes. Everybody was staring at it and drawing on it with their fingers. So it went very well.
Good job. Good job. Any questions of Aaron on this agenda item? All right, we'll move on then to local government programs and reports with Zach.
Skip, I have one more slide that's not in the board packet. I apologize.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Sorry, Zach. So just some other items of mention. So over the past month, we've participated in Delta High School's mock interviews. It was a really good opportunity to interview some students with an interest in local government and politics and public administration. Many of them are interested in potential internships with not only the COG, any sort of local jurisdiction. They would like to know of any opportunities. Another thing that was done is that staff has been helping the city of Benton City with their climate planning assistance. Elizabeth Garcia developed and executed a climate change survey for Benton City and set the record for survey responses for the city of Benton City in only a 6-week window. And the 100 is on the screen because that is exactly how many responses were gathered in 6 weeks.
Good job.
And then lastly, we are working on the Tri-Cities Regional Climate Change Approach. We're working with 5 jurisdictions. In the next coming weeks, you'll probably be seeing on your internal staff calendars, there's several meetings that will be popping up of our regional comprehensive group. And then also jurisdiction-specific meetings will be starting at the beginning of March.
Aaron, thank you for that. And board members, any questions or comments on this slide of Aaron's? All right, hearing none, then we'll move on to Zach, local government program reports.
Actually, could I go back?
Oh, sorry.
Sure. Go ahead, Michelle.
I'm going backwards, Blaze is going forward. So there was one other thing that Aaron didn't mention in his report that I think for our board members is important out of that conversation that happened on Wednesday. We have mentioned in the last 2 or 3 board meetings some interest that was being driven by TRIDEC in potentially asking for state funding for a proviso to help study a major infrastructure project with the hopes of perhaps at some point in the future that doesn't look really promising today, but of seeking a federal funding ask. Okay, don't let everybody laugh at once, but as part of that conversation, what I think was really helpful is that there was consensus amongst those in the meeting to, one, all of these studies or all of these projects have been studied at one point or another in the past individually, but we have not actually looked at them as an interconnected set of projects that would achieve that outer loop. So that's really what we're talking about as a potential study need, and how can we seek support in order to combine all of those previous studies, update them into something really exploring that as a larger interconnected project. So that was important. I think the other thing that was important is a real clarity that came from those in the room of the COG's role as the provider of data and study, and in this case, you know, TRIDEC as the driver of that consensus for legislative on a state or federal level support for these kinds of activities. So just I think I heard a better level of clarity from everybody about the COG's role and TRIDEC's role, and we talk about how do we speak with one voice, how do we actually accomplish that. So I felt really good about how that conversation happened, and because that tied to so many past conversations we've had in board meetings recently, I wanted to make sure that we shared that. Now I will give the clicker to
Third time's the charm.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Zach Rackheim, Local Government Programs Director. And just to kick off some highlights with the Economic Development District, we have completed, or the EDAC, our Economic Development District Advisory Committee, has worked with us in late January since we last met to review and complete the SWOT analysis for our SEDS update. Our meeting earlier this week went through and established priorities and goals for the new SEDS update as well. And for our guests that may not know, our SEDS is our Community Economic Development Strategy, which is the required document from the Federal Economic Development Administration that has to be updated every 5 years, well, and amended every year as well, just minor amendments, but we're in our full update here. So staff has begun composition of the document, continually working with monthly meetings with our EDAC group. We do have 3 new members that we will be presenting to the board for ratification in the next meeting in March, and maybe additional members too, as we're still trying to actively recruit for the committee. Moving on to funding opportunities, I'll turn it over to Kristen to give us a brief update on what we got going on.
Good morning, and brief is going to be the definite word. Unfortunately, as many know, our funding sources and specifically our grants are on hold right now in all departments now. Last month, we had not heard from Justice, but Justice has also put a freeze on their funding opportunities. However, they are still taking the grants. So I'm working with a couple entities on those. And my focus now will be moving to the state grants. And I have seen in the last few days, grants for housing and for energy projects. So as I find other ones, I will send those out to the group. If you guys have questions or specific areas you'd like me to look, please let me know so that I can kind of do a deep dive through those state grants and maybe some federal ones as well.
Thank you, Kristen, and just real quick on some of our regional technical assistance and the bridge acquisition, or the bridge and trails meeting with Benton City coming up.
Yes, sorry, thank you. So we've been working with Benton City as they work towards using their HUD grant from 2022. And that's for $2 million to purchase and renovate the Union Pacific Bridge to connect it to existing trails. So we have a meeting next week with the county, the city, and then Taptail Greenway, Friends of Badger, and Red Mountain to talk about kind of the next steps for moving that project forward. So that meeting is here on Wednesday.
Great convening.
Kate, did you have a question?
Yes.
Excuse me, Zach. Kate, did you have a question or comment?
Yes, I'm sure that you're absolutely on top of it, but I am actually calling in from Olympia because of the Association of Washington City Action Days. And yesterday when I spoke with Representative Clicker of the 16th, he had mentioned something that he had recently learned about, in that in even years, there is a Department of Commerce grant that becomes available. And I would imagine that you're aware of it, but I just wanted to make sure that bug was put into people's ears so that they knew that's coming up next year to apply for. At least currently, that's the plan.
Good. Thanks, Kate.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate that.
Go ahead, Zach.
Okay. And moving on to other technical assistance and some of our regional cooperation. As part of our partnership here at the COG with the Tri-City Strategic Alliance, we have been actively engaged with the Tri-City Agricultural Council, and really working with them on the feasibility study and the development of their pilot project, the Tri-Cities Ag Innovation Center. The recently completed the feasibility study outlined potential programming for the center, locations, funding mechanisms, and any operational models for the facility. A key component of the Ag Council's efforts is to examine successful ag innovation centers from the region, from around the country, and including direct engagement with our operational staff. BFCOG has been invited to join the Tri-Cities Ag Council delegation on April 3rd and 4th to visit AgStart, a well-regarded agricultural innovation facility in Woodland, California, outside Sacramento. The opportunity and the meetings will be to engage with local entrepreneurs in the ag sector, researchers, stakeholders, educators, and hold discussion with regional economic development professionals. So staff wanted to present that to the board, and we just welcome any feedback or input from the board regarding staff participation in this delegation. And as always, we look forward to continued collaboration with regional agricultural initiatives. So any input from the board?
Any comments or input for Zach? Zach, I think this is a wonderful opportunity. So thank you for setting this up and for joining the delegation.
I do have a comment.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Gretel.
So I was at the Ag Innovation, was it just last week, meeting that they had, and you know, they're putting together a lot of great ideas, and there's a definite need for it in our community. But I think that obviously funding sources and then like ongoing income to, you know, to keep it going are still kind of concern. So I think that's was kind of always the large hole, kind of missing gap area of how exactly do you do that. So I think getting more information and going to some of these other ones is actually a really good thing to do they want to move forward on something like that, because there's a good start, but there's a long ways to go to get it to fruition.
Thank you, Gretel. Anybody else have any comments or input? Okay, Zach, did you have something on the said SWOT review?
Yeah, we did. Real quick, just to jump to our ARPA Economic Resiliency Grant, we talked about some ARPA funding that was allocated from Benton and Franklin counties. We have completed our 2024 report activities with reporting to the Benton County and the Franklin County Commissioners since we last met. So checking that box and continually working on creating those associations and furthering deeper our projects with those counties. So real quick for the board, well, maybe not real quick, but we, as part of our EDAC meeting in January, the EDAC had forwarded a recommendation of the final SWOT analysis and the items within to the board for discussion. And just to see if there's anything missing, if anything needs clarification, if there's anything that needs to be added. As you recall, our SWOT was conducted for the SEDS in November and December of 2024. We issued a survey with 34 respondents, and we had one virtual workshop with great participation. So we want to just run through these real quick. I'm not going to read them off verbatim, just some of the highlights, but to see if this captures what our current strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats are for the region. So some of the identified strengths, obviously, if you look at the underlying parts, those are our big sectors. So economic drivers are a strength. So ag and food processing, nuclear, healthcare, manufacturing, infrastructure. There are transportation options, and certainly our airport is an asset as well. Cost of development was allocated to that. That's generally, if you compare to the other parts of the region and the state, there's an affordable cost of living, low energy costs, regional development costs. Reasonable, excuse me. We have a strong educated workforce with great higher ed options, including great K-12 schools, great quality of life with recreation, minimal traffic, and obviously a favorable climate. Growth in community is a big one. So obviously our local government delegations and our ports are definitely economically positive. There is room to grow, and obviously, as we talked about with City of Kennewick's presentation, as we all know, it is a regional shopping hub. We have diverse industry too. We have established industry and we have opportunities as well. So I did kind of read everything, but any thoughts on our strengths? Does this capture our regional strengths? Is there anything that is missing?
What's the board think? Anything you'd like to add or any suggestions for Zach? Well, Zach, good job. And you read that awful fast too. Thank you.
I have one area for the education and workforce.
Go ahead,
yes.
The K through 12 schools, but also I think just the TriTech, some of our skills programs that we have. We also have in Kennewick on Edison, I can't remember what it's called exactly, but I think it's the Electrical Alliance for the union apprenticeship program.
Okay.
And then also our police training center that's been located here within the last couple of years is a really big advocate and benefit for the region, I think, as well.
Good points. Kate, you have a comment?
Yeah, and actually, definitely fantastic, Gretel. I was going to mention those and you got them, so awesome. Definitely echo that support for all of the different trainings that we have available in our community. But one of the things that I'm wondering if it would have a spot on here would be our connection being so strong to our legislation, especially because we have those like Representative Barnard, who was on the Ledge Council, and she's so heavily involved in things like the Nuclear Energy Caucus to help with those economic drivers like the nuclear energy sector. So I'm not sure if that's a place where it could be put on there, but it's definitely a strength we have.
Thank you, Kate. Councilman Grimm, comments?
Thank you. No, I think Gretel made some really good call outs there. I guess one thing to add as far as the infrastructure is the rail yard. Our rail yard here is mammoth compared to so many other areas across the country that obviously allows us to move rail. And for that, I mean, we could even add just the shipping ports we have for moving grain up and down our waterways, saving, the weight and obviously everything else off the rails and the roadways. So yeah, those could potentially be added too.
Thank you for that. And I see somebody's hand up, but I don't see a name. I just have an iPhone.
Commissioner Clint Didier here.
Go ahead, Clint.
Yes, along with Greta's comments, trade schools, the trade school activity with welders and workers that way too, because we're running short on people that can weld and can manufacture, that can fit things together, and that also needs to be promoted.
Good, thank you for that. Does anyone else have any other suggestions or comments? Zach, does that help?
That helps, thank you. I'd like to move on to weaknesses now.
Please.
Kind of change the pace here a little bit. But some of the weaknesses we identified, and you'll notice that there are going to be some similar sections and similar themes throughout. That could be a strength, a weakness, or an opportunity or threat. But with workforce, just challenges in attracting and retaining workforce. A higher cost of labor in Washington State, and especially with agricultural labor. Infrastructure and planning, there's the age-old adage that there's no single central walkable community. We are 3, 4, 5 handful of cities that are all collaborating on things. Insufficient adoption of our public transit system. And then added by our EDAC was compliance with the Climate Commitment Act for growth and planning. And then as we talked about lower costs as being a strength, there's still some housing cost and availability factors that can play in as a weakness as well. Economic risk factors, as we've seen over the last couple of months, there are communities that are vulnerable to major employer shutdowns. Some of our economic constraints, could we be over-reliant on agriculture, Hanford, PNNL, and is there limited diversification? There's high state business tax, and there's lack of incentives to attract businesses if we're in competition with other states. And then future power delivery constraints. Well, we have low energy costs. Do we have the energy that's going to come here to meet the demand of the industries coming in? And then some community amenities, limited arts and culture activities were identified. Once again, not seen as a single cohesive metro area. And that was more in that attraction. Are we able to attract business, industries, culture, and amenities as a community of 320,000 people, or are they still looking at each individual city with their smaller populations? And then access to healthcare and recruitment of medical professionals such as general practice doctors. Anything else that needs additions or clarifications?
Board members, would you like to add anything? Kate?
Thank you. Yes. I'm not certain if it would go along with what you already have for workforce and talent, but I think that especially now we have to be very concerned about a lot of the migrant workers that are working in the fields for all of our agriculture, not so much involving cost, but probably more related to attraction and retention just due to what's going on at the federal level.
Okay.
Anyone else have comments or input for Zach? Zach?
Speak a little bit.
The air containment, I can't remember what it was called, but.
Non-attainment area?
Yeah, non-attainment area, because I thought that was gonna limit growth.
Or flirting.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know if that needs to be on there or that's captured with the compliance CCA.
We can definitely explore what air quality non-attainment, how that ties into climate commitment and everything. Thank you.
Can somebody speak a little bit more on that, how that affects potential ability to grow?
Yeah, it would be, so if we do become a non-attainment area, it means that our area would be subject to certain air quality regulations. And we would have to have specific monitors at different locations throughout the region. And we have to show a lot of, I'll say, low cost solutions before going to just building out something bigger. Giving an oversimplified answer, I can follow up with more information for you.
But it really affects roads, things like that.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilman Grimm, did you have another comment?
Thank you. Yes, I do. And I may be in the minority of this one, but I don't even know that, our lack of compliance with the CCA is such a bad thing. I think that's the kind of thing that is so politically motivated that we should be looking for wiggle room. I know a lot of it's mandated by law, and we obviously need to observe those things. But yeah, again, some of it I think is absolutely ridiculous. Some of the mandates, and so I don't know if that's a complete weakness that we aren't fully in compliance where we don't have to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have? Was someone speaking?
Yeah, I was just going to follow up on Councilmember Grimm's clarification on the CCA, and I believe that our weakness was the fact that we are trying, like it's difficult to try to comply to it, and that developers and cities and communities are looking for that wiggle room to kind of see how we could best serve what the needs of our localized community are in regard to a state mandate.
Any other suggestions for Zach on weaknesses?
Hey, I just want to say I appreciate that clarification, Zach. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Zach, great job. Do you have anything else to add?
Nothing more on this, just a quick review of opportunities and then threats. So back to the optimism with opportunities. For economic development, obviously industrial recruitment is a huge opportunity. Leveraging agricultural innovations, as we just talked about with the Strategic Alliance and the Ag Innovation Center. We have room for infrastructure expansion and investment, which was obviously a key meeting here at the COG this week. We are great at, and we can be great at attracting forward-thinking leadership in the community, fostering our regional cooperation. We talked about the opportunities to adopt Main Street programs for our downtowns in all our cities. And then Broadmoor Retail is certainly going to bring a lot of economic development opportunity in that sector as well. There's opportunities for diversification, so looking at clean energy companies, healthcare and biotech advancements, supporting new technology and ideas and industries. And then innovation and technology. We've got PNNL here, we've got great local innovators and entrepreneurs, so how can we capitalize on some of their innovations? Exploring microgrids and small nuclear reactors and other advancements in that field, and then developing policies and incentives for collaborative forward-thinking economic plans, which of course personally I'd like to say the SEDS will be such a document. And then obviously regional collaboration. Obviously we're all here, we all represent different portions of the region. So certainly just keeping our upswing and improvements on that, and developing conversations around cross collaborative initiatives as well. So those are some great opportunities, but I'd love to hear more or any thoughts.
Other suggestions for opportunities from board members?
I have a few things I think that aren't on this. So I think arts, culture, I think that Vista Fields taking off and its kind of live work concept is that's going to be emerging, I think is an opportunity. There's opportunities there. I think that the convention center addition, with the addition of more hotels and just bringing in more hospitality, possibility for more economic development from tourism, I think is an opportunity. And then also some of the recent work that's been going on with reconveying some of our shorelines is a huge opportunity for our area.
Gretel, thank you. Anyone else have any other opportunities?
Vicki Gordon here from the Port of Pasco. At the airport, the AIM Center, the Aeronautical Innovation and Manufacturing Center that we're working on, probably would be an opportunity here at our airport.
Good, thank you, Vicki. Kate?
Thank you. Yes. Something also for arts, culture, recreation that I think should be added is that we've got the Raceway, the Tri-Cities Raceway that's opened up, and a lot of opportunities there for more events to occur.
Any other suggestions on opportunities from anybody? Zach, anything else?
Yeah, finally just going through some threats. So it's good, bad, good, bad. But some of the threats that the EDAC and our community through the SWOT survey had seen was just with housing and workforce. So rising housing costs, insufficient housing stock. We talked about the availability earlier. Workforce shortages, competition for talent, mismatch between workforce growth and job creation rates. And that was a huge topic at the TriDec summit the other week. Childcare shortages too, is a big one. And then return to office. So calling remote workers back in and accommodating them, or would people want to come back in and work in the office? Some of the regulatory and political risks identified, or state and federal regulations, creating barriers. And then this is sort of a contrary statement to what Board Member Moran brought up, but as we talk about, we've got great connections with our local legislators, and they're really working hard to fight for our region. There still is an identified lack of cohesive regional political capital, both in Washington, D.C. and Olympia. Obviously, some of the economic risks we're seeing, especially with agriculture, there's vulnerability to global market fluctuations. There's still some dependency on post-COVID funding, like ARPA dollars and some of the rescue plan dollars that are no longer available. And then with infrastructure and energy, as we talk about growth for expansion and regional infrastructure, there's still some transportation issues. We talked about rail crossings and things like that. Snake River Dam removal can certainly exacerbate some transportation issues, and then our energy supply and delivery as well. And then some of the competitor advantages that we see here in Washington State is, other states in our area offering lower wages for workforce, attracting industry. Are we at risk for industry to be relocated out of the area to a different part of the country or region or state? And then is there an inability or a pending inability to compete effectively? So that rounded out our threats from EDAC as a recommendation to the board, and we'll take any notes.
Board, Kate, do you have a threat possibility?
Yeah. Thank you. Yes. After hearing what you said, Zach, I think that it isn't so much of a saying two different things at once, and rather I would say that instead of it being a strength, I would maybe say that our legislators are an opportunity, but it is a threat currently still. So I think that they would be valid opportunities and threats involving our state legislators, and the fact that we have people like Rep. Barnard, Connors, Clicker, all of them, Rude there, and then our senators. I think that definitely I could see it as, because currently they're in the minority, a threat, but more of an opportunity at the very least that we have them.
Thank you, Kate. Does anyone else have any threats to offer, Zach?
I do. Oh, go ahead. I should raise my hand.
Who was speaking? Vicky, was that you? Go ahead, Gretel.
Oh, are you sure? Okay, sorry. So I think the multifamily housing and affordable housing is definitely a threat, but I also think legislation within the Washington state and additional proposed legislation is making it and going to make it even more difficult for more people want to come and do business and to provide affordable housing. I think that it's a major threat that we need to, keep talking about. That when the raising minimum wage, we already are really high. They're talking about raising it even further. And when you talk about attracting businesses, Idaho's lower wages. I mean, it's Oregon, but you can list 49 other states that are going to be attracting businesses more so than Washington State. And then rent control measures and things like that are, again, more threats to our housing and workforce climate, because again, it's going to put a hamper on innovation development and people continuing to want to provide housing in our areas.
Good point, Gretel. Thank you. Commissioner Didier?
Yeah, a concern that has been raised by two presses that press our alfalfa and ship it overseas is we have foreign investors coming in, buying their own presses, buying the hay, and they're squeezing them out of the market. And this is a big market for the Columbia Basin, is the press hay overseas. And we need to talk to our legislators, federal and state. We've got to stop this. This is something that I know that the administration is working on, and we're losing our ground and our businesses to foreign investors moving into our country and doing business and taking it away from the businesses here in the United States. Very, very much a concern.
Great, thank you. Does anyone else have any other possible threats to offer, Zach?
Yeah, I would second what Clint Didier just said about the loss of, our agricultural products. And would add in also the as a potential threat, ongoing threat is a loss of agricultural land to other uses. When we are an area that does depend so heavily on agriculture, and we have such a uniquely rich agricultural soil, region, climate, that other places in our state do not enjoy. It's one of Tri-Cities' strengths, and so the thought that we could lose that through a variety of means is a major threat.
Good, thank you for that. Zach, anything else?
No, I think that's it for us. I really appreciate everyone's weighing in on this and look forward to more updates as we move through the spring. I'll turn it over to Michelle.
Zach, good job.
I'm done with them threatening me.
Good job, Zach. That was a great report. Michelle, you're up.
Okay. So last month, Skip mentioned the strategic planning that our staff have been doing for the last number of years and asked for a little bit more of an update for the board. There's a lot of detail there, so I included in your packet a summary of what our strategic planning activities have been and a very 30,000 foot level view of our 3-year picture and 1-year plan. But what I wanted to actually share with you a little more closely today was the 10-year target. So just to go back in, since 2021, our COG leadership team has been doing annual strategic planning. We've been following the strategies from the book Traction by Gino Wickman and adopting those for our purposes, and especially the tools and focus on accountability, which we think is really important to building trust with our members and our community. So we do produce 3 separate plans, a 10-year target, a 3-year picture, and a 1-year plan. So in the book, when they talk about the 10-year target, it must be specific and measurable so that there can't be any gray areas. You'll know the right goal when you have it. It will be the one that creates passion, excitement, and energy for every single person in the organization whenever it's repeated. So if you go back to 2021, the end of 21, when we were doing this strategic visioning as staff, I think you can probably, those of you who were serving on the board or affiliated at that time, the reputation and trust level of our organization at that point was not what it is today. So when we settled on this goal, we understood at the time, it felt a little risky to set this as our goal. So our big, hairy, audacious goal has been since 2021 as staff that BFCOG be seen in 10 years from now is the planning authority for the Benton-Franklin region, ensuring a continuous, collaborative, data-driven, comprehensive planning process that fosters growth, safe and efficient movement, and development throughout the region. And you'll see there's several words underlined on the slide, and planning authority is bolded. Part of the reason it's bolded, and that was, for me, what made that goal a little bit risky, is that for our member entities, if the COG said, we want to be the planning authority, the first thing anybody's going to think is we don't want a council situation like perhaps PSRC in the Seattle area where that entity has a high level of control and consolidation of resources, and that made people uncomfortable. So we went on using this rationale of being specific and measurable so that there's no gray, and we clarified what those things mean for us. So in your packet, every one of those words and what demonstration of it looks like is quantified in your packet. But the big point for us is that we were defining planning authority using the definition knowledge accepted as fact because it was stated by an expert or a respected source in a particular subject area. That's what we're striving for BFCOG to be, is to be that known, accepted, respected source. So that when we put out information or we develop a plan or we share data, it is accepted as fact because it came from the COG, that we have that level of trust. So that is the big goal that for staff, we're working toward as a 10-year target. So for us, at the end of the day, successful achievement really looks like that the COG is represented at the regional planning tables. Today, we're not yet at all the tables. Sometimes we're not top of mind enough to be invited to the party. So we get excited when we get invited to the party. BFCOG provides the regional metrics used for analysis. Just this year, you've begun to see some of that incorporation of metrics that were developed and adopted inside the COG being used for some analysis. So we're moving that direction. That we are accepted as, I won't say the voice, but a voice of the region, and supported in speaking on behalf of our jurisdictions when it comes to regional planning data and analysis and issues of mutual interest and concern. Obviously, we are not the right organization to be the voice of the region at all tables and in all forums, but in our areas of focus, we want to be accepted as that. And then BFCOG is considered a best practices standard by our peers. As in 2021, we were looking to everybody else to say, how are you the best practices standard and how can we learn from you? And so we are still striving to be seen as that source amongst our peers. So that's a look at our 10-year target. What I'd like to do is at the next couple of board meetings, we can talk a little bit more about what that 3-year picture looks like and the opportunities that we've actually achieved working off of that 3-year goal going forward. And then of course, our 1-year plan is just where does the rubber meet the road? No transportation pun intended, to accomplish the things we're working on. Any questions about the 10-year target?
Board members, any questions?
Strategic planning.
Any questions? I'd just like to make a comment. This is really a breath of fresh air because Michelle is absolutely correct. And 2021 and prior years, all the involvement that I've had, I didn't see any real planning for the future. I didn't see any effort to go out and meet with jurisdictions and say, hey, what can we do for you? How can we be a mutual voice? In fact, there was one year when I believe the COG came up with some suggestions for the Legislative Council that were completely ignored. And we had to go around the Legislative Council and actually go to our legislators and say, look, here's the COG, here's what we want to see you work on. And we got it through that way. But the COG was not looked at very highly. And I think this is a huge, huge difference in the last 4 years. So congratulations to the staff for what you're doing right now.
Thank
Michelle,
you,
you want to continue?
Yes, I would. And I hope that nice compliment sets the stage for this next thing that we'd like to propose for you.
And you didn't pay me for that, by the way.
No, I didn't. I appreciate it. So as staff and as part of our strategic planning, one of the goals that we set actually in 2023, looking into 2024, was that we wanted to do a better job of just facilitating meetings and events and how could we look at that as professional development. And we read a great book called The Art of Gathering to learn and practice some of those strategies. And so as a goal, we said, in 2025, we would like to host an event as the COG, because that's not really something that we do. And something for us to consider. Well, in our strategic planning in December with our leadership team, and we were envisioning kind of what kind of an event could that be? What could that look like? That was on the heels of all of this new momentum around speaking with one voice as the region, and how do we build trust amongst our jurisdictions to a greater degree so that we can speak with one voice, we can put that weight of our 3rd largest metro to work for us. And we're also recognizing that while we all profess to care about the region and think regionally, we don't really have a lot of opportunities for the elected officials and staff members to actually engage in focused regional thinking. We sit at a lot of regional tables and we think about the region, but most of the time we are at the table representing the needs and influence of our individual jurisdictions discussing the region. And so this is something really specific. So if we want to help influence positively all of those scenarios, the event idea we landed on was around the idea of futuring. And if you've never heard of futuring, it's an emerging strategic thinking method that moves beyond traditional planning. It's a structured approach that explores the possible, probable, and preferred futures. And they use data forecasting, scenario planning, and the degree of depth that a futuring strategic planning or strategic thinking opportunity is obviously depends on what it is. So we got to thinking about, just like we focused in this meeting on Wednesday when we're talking about our transportation system, if you look forward 50 years from 2075, or you look back 50 years to the Tri-Cities, you know, we've gone from 100,000 population to 320 today. By 2075, we're talking about nearly 800,000 people. How can we go through an exercise that looks at the possible and probable and preferred futures of our region looking at 2075? The other part of that was really exciting for us is that as jurisdictions, the traditional planning horizon is about 25 years. So we all have some preconceived ideas of what the Tri-Cities is going to look like 25 years from now, because everybody's been doing comp planning and other things looking forward 25 years. So if the goal is to get people to collaborate and think regionally beyond what we've already considered, we need to look out further. So what we're envisioning is an event where we would bring together the city managers, strong mayors, county administrators, the public works directors, economic development directors, and at least one elected member from each governing body from the jurisdictions. So by the time you pick that many people and members of the COG, you're probably talking about 75, 80, I mean, this is a big gathering, right? The intent would be that we would bring them together with a professional futuring facilitator to go through the exercise of exploring the probable, possible, and potential futures of our region 50 years from today. What this event is meant to be is to catalyze regional thinking and to help us be stronger and more collaborative in the future. What this event is not is a repeat of a My Tri 2030. The intent is not to actually come up with a plan. The intent is to go, basically it's the journey and not the destination. By bringing everybody together to think and go through the process, we would strengthen our relationships, build trust, and begin to kind of open ourselves to thinking as a region. So this is just a concept that I'm floating to you as the board at this point, because while as the staff, we were really excited about the potential. I've spoken about this conceptually to the rest of the Tri-Cities Strategic Alliance directors. They were also really excited about what it could do to help improve our relationships and collaboration. Really, I want your feedback on this as an idea, because if we don't believe we could get people at the table to invest enough time to kind of go through the process, or be able to communicate the value, you know, then it won't achieve what we would like it to achieve. So I would love your feedback.
Michelle,
It looks like,
thank you.
yes.
Thank you so much. And I'll go to Councilman Grimm.
Yeah, hey Michelle, thank you for the presentation. And that even kind of stood out to me in the SWOT analysis, as a either a weakness or an opportunity, us collaborating together. And I just even think of an example like the job Kennewick, the good job they're starting to do with their Columbia Gardens, the wine and artisan village there along Columbia Drive. And I know James Sexton has, this big plan for Osprey Point and what he wants to do. And is there a way that we can kind of connect those to where we can have people going back and forth? I know I've heard the idea of a water taxi or that kind of stuff floating around, but I think it's something like that where we can connect. Obviously, there's this big river, going between at least a couple of the municipalities, which does make that a geographical challenge. But yeah, I think that is a real opportunity. And let's face it, we should all vie for our own municipalities. That's why we're elected. That's why we're representatives and all that, is to stand up for our own area. But yeah, I think this is really a good idea when we can come together for a regionally focused project that will bring attention to our region from outside of our region, whether it be for tourism or economic development or just arts and entertainment that I've heard brought up a couple times today, would be a real win. And yeah, how we could connect something like Osprey Point and the Columbia Gardens Wine and Artisan Village would be it's a great idea, forward thinking, and I think would benefit us all in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you. Kate?
Thank you very much. I absolutely love this idea as a way for just connecting and communicating with all of the different jurisdictions in the area. And I don't mean to call this out, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like your hope is that this be more of a short event, but a connections of, yeah, we're all kind of on the same page of where we really are excited about things and want to see things go, and not have it, as you had said, be something where it's a planning sort of a thing. It's not a rehash of my try. Because I know that myself, even when I start to think about these things, I think, oh yeah, this should be a great idea. And then I start going down the line of thinking of, how would I do that? Let's do this. Let's plan this. So I think that it would need to have someone, and I believe that you have the ability to do this, Michelle, someone to really rein it in and go, okay, this is not a planning session, guys. We're just talking about what we like, what we hope, no planning. Is that an accurate assessment of what your hope is for this, Michelle?
That is an accurate assessment, and that was similar to the comment I wanted to go back to Councilman Grimm, is that I believe that those ideas and connections will come out of these discussions. I mean, if you think about, you get any group of people together and we start down the path of, okay, if we don't do anything different than what we're doing today, what is our community going to look like 50 years from now? And then going through a separate kind of vein that says, okay, now let's imagine the worst. What are possible things that could happen to this community? Right, wrong? I mean, nobody was really envisioning a pandemic. Nobody, I think, is really envisioning what we're seeing today. There's other things that are going on, and how could that cause a complete change in direction for our communities? And how can we be thinking about what might happen? And then change gears again to also be looking at, if we could have a community that everybody wanted, what would that be? What would that look like? And so it's more about expanding everybody's thinking together about those pieces that will help improve how we work together. Because the reality is, the COG, if we go to the point of making a plan, the conversation is just going to be about transportation. And which is fine. And we could talk a little bit about economic development. But if we're going to talk about economic development, now we have to have a bunch of other people at the table to really come up with a plan. If we're going to talk about business, now we've got to have the chamber and the AWB and other people to talk about a plan. And the truth is that those other planning agencies, there's places where those things can happen. For me, it's more about just as governments in our region, can we all just sit down together and go through a function that just helps us improve trust, improve our vision, and help with that transition between the times that we're thinking about and advocating for what's good for our communities and our community needs, because yes, that's what you were all elected to do. But there is also that other piece of, we also have to think about what's good for the region as a whole, and there are going to be times where there may have to be some give and take. And the more we trust each other and understand what people are really wanting and desiring, the better that's going to be.
Michelle, thank you for
Excellent.
that.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
This is Vicki Gordon. I think this is a great idea. If you're seeking board approval and support, you have my full support for this. I would just suggest one thing. There's quite a few of us that aren't going to be around in 50 years. Our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren will be here, and maybe we could enlist an invitation to some of the students from our community to participate as well.
I like that. Any other suggestions, Vicki? That was good. I like that.
No, I think it's a great idea, and I think you've got the constituents there, but I do think we probably need some younger people. That's it.
BBC has a program in project development for, I think for public service for the public. So I think it's either CBC or WSU has either a major or a graduate degree in administration and public sector.
Interesting. Okay.
I think so too, and I just read about it, and I'm trying.
Yeah.
I don't remember where I read about it either. So.
And I like that from this perspective of we can get a different perspective without adding some additional expectations of what the outcome might or might not be, which I think would be helpful. The one thing I didn't mention is that for the professional facilitator, it was in the report if you had an opportunity to read that. I always just assume you guys are really busy and you have not read the report in detail. But Dr. Lori Barber is the newly promoted president for the College of Eastern Idaho, where I worked previously. And when Dr. Barber was working on her doctorate, she was working with the Arizona State University. They have a department of futuring that works on using this study to help industries and business kind of explore how they can future-proof or better direct their businesses. And so they worked with the college, and now Lori, as the current president, and the previous president, Dr. Rick Ament, they both are doing facilitation and writing about using the concept of futuring. Lori is actually this week in Texas doing a futuring activity with all of the community colleges in the state of Texas to talk about higher education. So Lori is really excited about the idea of being able to come and be our facilitator and help us kind of build this event for this purpose. So there is a trained individual from outside of our community who would be willing to come in and help facilitate. So my only other question for you all is just, I wanted to get your sense of the potential commitment from the jurisdictions. A great idea is great, but will people commit the time for an endeavor such as this? And in asking for that time and recognizing you have to have a concentrated amount of time to really get in and do this. 8 hours would be great. You could do it in 4 and feel kind of abbreviated. Is that too much to expect? What we were kind of envisioning is perhaps like the night before a dinner to kind of set the stage with everybody and help kind of warm people up. And then the next day kind of dig in and go through the activity. Any thoughts? The other thing we were looking at is timing. September, October-ish was kind of what we were generally shooting for, unless you come back and say those are terrible times. And for jurisdictions, there's another time of year that would be really better.
Michelle, I think probably the best thing to do is we're individuals here and we report to a commission or a board of directors or something. I think if we had something to take back so that we can get an approval from, I'm afraid that if we just make something, we may go back to our jurisdictions and they say, oh no, we need more information or something. Personally, I think this is a fantastic idea. Michelle briefed me on this a little while ago, and I thought it was great right from the start. I think one question that I'd maybe like to ask is anybody that's on this call right now or participating in this meeting opposed to future 2075 going forward? And hearing none, Michelle, I think you ought to just move this forward. I think if we had information on what's expected of the jurisdictions that we could take back and get approval from each of our individual jurisdictional partners or jurisdictions that we represent, might be a good thing, and then come back and give you that information.
Perfect. There is a draft communication in your packet. My intention was, once I felt like we had some consensus from the board, would be that I would go and connect with the manager administrator group from all of your staff administration to have a few more of those logistical conversations as well, and then dig into really planning what the event could look like.
I think that's perfect, and I didn't hear any objection at all. So let's move forward. I like it.
Okay, thank you all very much. I'm glad you didn't hate it, because we were really excited about it.
I think it's great.
Okay,
all right.
So I'll move on to my general update, and this will be fast because we have an item of business we need to get to. But the one I think you may have concerns about is just related to federal funding. We don't know a lot. We've gotten very little, if any, direct feedback from our federal agencies, limited input from the state and other industry associations. Really, the only guidance we've heard of any kind right now is just, if you have an active funding agreement in place, stay the course. If you're operating outside of a direct funding agreement, exercise prudence, and we're all just kind of waiting for more information. I included 2 letters that the Association of Metropolitan Planning Organizations sent to DOT Secretary Duffy related to assorted executive orders and their potential impacts to MPOs. I wanted you to have that information for background. I mentioned last month I had been appointed to the AMPO Leadership Roundtable, and for our first leadership roundtable discussion the first week of March, the topic will actually be leading in times of uncertainty. And AMPO has put out a survey to the over 400 MPOs around the country asking for input on who has continuity plans, who has reserve funds, how did you fund your reserve fund, well, how are you dealing with trying to make decisions in a vacuum of information. So that's going to be some really interesting information once we get that survey information back for us. Internally as staff, we have started initial financial analysis just to make sure that we're ready to respond if at any point either funding delays or a loss of funding somewhere occurs, just so that we're not surprised when that happens. We don't have anything ready to report back to the board, but just know we are doing that background work. And of course, creating a continuity of operations plan was one of our 2025 staff goals. So this is just escalating our preparation to get that done. Couple other quick items. Alexis and I have begun to work on the member assessment methodology. This is something we've been talking about for a while. How do we quantify the percentages that you all pay in your dues, and why do you pay what you pay, and how does that become scalable with change in population or other things? We intend to bring that to the board early in Q2. The other thing we've had in our budget for, this will be the 3rd year now, to invest in some software solutions that'll help us reduce risk, improve efficiency, ensure compliance. So that would be like a government website software, something for public records request management. Thankfully, we don't have many, but there are still a lot of mechanics that go into being compliant in doing those. And then social media archiving, which is another one that it was eye-opening to me to recognize the level of risk and compliance that goes along today with having social media. of any kind, and being able to meet the public records expectations of the state of Washington, and also the expectation that digital records be kept in their native form, to keep the metadata there. And when there are some unique challenges to that when it comes to social media, and social media is not going away. So we are exploring those solutions. We do have funds already built into our budget for this, but we're finally digging into vet solutions and get that going. So I'm excited about that. Also with our transition to internal accounting, and bringing Alexis on board, he has been doing a fantastic job of working with our QuickBooks, doing cleanup, documenting processes and procedures related to accounting. But I know there have been some questions raised about quality assurance in bringing our bookkeeping in-house. And so we've identified a CPA QuickBooks expert that can provide a periodic review of our QuickBooks reporting and be on call for guidance as we're working through that. So for me, that's a wonderful bridge between having a strong staff accountant and the annual auditing that we do to actually just make sure that the books and reports are clean and being calculated appropriately. So. Outreach and engagement, one of our focuses is staff, and when we talk about wanting to be a best practice peer to other organizations, is we've been submitting some proposals to present at other professional development workshops at national conferences. So Erin and I submitted a proposal to the AMPO annual conference for next gen culture, strategies to successfully recruit and retain planning professionals. I submitted a proposal to AWC for the summer conference in Kennewick about building a culture of civility and belonging in public service. And then there are also two other related national associations that we're involved with, NARC, which is the National Association of Regional Councils, and NADO, which is the National Association of Development Organizations. Their conference is in Salt Lake City this year, so that'd be a great one to try and get involved in. So we'll let you know if anybody wants to hear from us, but we're at least, throwing the line out there. Gretel and Kate both were references for me when I submitted my proposal to AWC, so thank you both for that. I appreciate your support.
Michelle, thank you. You have some more.
Got one other quick thing, which is just Benton County Public Facilities District. They adopted the resolution necessary to extend their taxing authority to continue to support the bond restructure for the expansion at Three Rivers, and there'll also be a bond restructure at some point in the future for expansion of the reach. So that was an important strategy for them. Okay, now I'm done.
Thank you. Any questions of Michelle before we move on? All right, we move on to action items then, and we'll start with support of WashDOT safety measures, and that's Tanner. Or Aaron, is that you?
I'll be taking it. Tanner had to leave for a personal matter, so I'm stepping in. So okay. This is an annual item. It comes to the board before all of you in February each year. This is showing our support of WashDOT safety performance measures. Before you and in your packet are several of just the statistics throughout the region. This is showing that we are planning in coordination with WashDOT's Vision Zero. There is a resolution also within your board packet. The WashDOT does leave the option for FPOs to adopt their own safety performance measures. We would then have to come up with our own methodology and our own Vision Zero, or we can plan to be planning in coordination with WashDOT's safety performance measures. But with that, there is a motion in front.
Go ahead. We have a proposed motion that's shown on the screen and in front of you to adopt resolution 01-25. Does anyone have any questions of Aaron? Kate?
Oh, I was going to make the motion, but I'll let anybody ask questions if they want first.
I hear none. Kate, go ahead.
I move to adopt Resolution 01-25, support of WashDOT's transportation targets and safety performance measures.
Thank you. Is there a second? Roy Keck seconded. Thank you. Any board discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of adopting resolution 01-25 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries unanimously and resolution 01-25 is adopted. Thank you. We'll move on then to call for projects guidebook. Aaron, that's you.
Yes. They seem to be clear right over the PowerPoint. Yes. All right. So in your packet, you had a copy of the Call for Projects Guidebook. I'm not going to walk through the entire thing. I am going to highlight the changes from our previous Call for Projects done back in 2022. We had a special call in 2023, but I'm going to be highlighting the major changes that have been discussed at the TAC level in December, January, and then again in February. And I want to give a special thanks to the Technical Advisory Committee for the level of in-depth discussions that were had at every single part of this guidebook. So thank you to all of your staff for all of the work they have done to be a part of this. So first, just you can see highlighted here, scores due to BFCOG on April 11th, and then staff at the COG will be scoring the non-subjective portions of the applications. So this would be scoring portions such as is the project on a freight network? What is the average daily traffic of the road? Those types of questions that don't rely on our subject matter expertise that the public works directors have. We're also shifting back the TAC meeting in April because it falls on the same week as spring break, so it'll be April 10th. Contingency list. A contingency list will be developed of partially funded projects, and then also we're having preservation applications that will be made up of our contingency list. So that is what is highlighted in front of you. Funding limits for individual projects. So each jurisdiction will be eligible to receive up to 4.2 million in funding during the call for projects. 4.2, that might seem like an arbitrary number. It is the cap on it's the amount of funding that urban large jurisdictions could receive within 1 year. And it was agreed upon at the TAC level. I will say nobody has ever received that amount of money call for projects, so it is not putting any sort of pretenses on anything. Lacey, can you go to the next slide, please? Next is funding next is funding for multiple phases of a project. This is specifically calling out in this call for projects that each project phase must be shown in a separate year. So this is just stating that, for example, you cannot have right-of-way and construction in 1 year on your application. They have to be shown in separate years. All right, here's the big one. Project programming. And I'm going to read this off the screen so it makes sense. So if a project sponsor indicates to BFCOG at the TAC meeting in April that they can obligate the project before the end of the federal fiscal year, they cannot obligate the project. They will be given a one-time pass and the project will be shifted to the next federal fiscal year. And the project that is the highest ranking on the contingency list will receive the funds. However, they have to obligate the project before July 1 of the next year. So in that same April TAC meeting, if they say, yes, we can obligate, and then they do not obligate, they will then lose the funds to that project. This might seem harsh. However, this is already an existing TIP policies an existing TIP policy that we have here at the COG. It is being reinforced here within the call for projects. This is also something that WashDOT has been asking us, I will say, as the MPOs, to hold jurisdictions more accountable so we can be eligible for redistributed funds from other states. So this will position us to receive more funding from the state if we stay churning on us obligating our projects. Lastly, as I talked about earlier about the carbon reduction program, so there is 2 motions in front of you, and within the guidebook. So with some of the federal executive orders, I will explain this. So the first motion is adopting the call for projects guidebook as presented. The second option is withholding the carbon reduction program funds. And if the carbon reduction program funds are continued after March 14th, we will have a special call for projects next year about the carbon reduction program funds. We had a special call in 2023, so this is something that has been done before. If we do go with option 1, I will say there is a possibility that on March 14th that our total amount will get reduced by $1.5 million. So that is why there is a second motion in front of you.
Aaron, thank you for that. Does the board member understand the 2 proposed motions, or does Aaron need to go through them again? I'm not hearing any questions. So Kate?
Yeah, I just want to make sure. So if proposal number 1 is approved, then we might lose money. But if proposal 2 is approved, we might not lose money. I just want to make sure I understand the difference between them budgetary wise.
Thank you, Kate. So option 1 is acting as if we would not have a potential of losing funding. Option 2 is saying we understand that we could be losing some funding and we will set aside a specific process for if we lose that funding.
Kate, just to clarify, how I would say that is because there is a potential, a known potential to lose carbon reduction program funding. If the board uses the second motion, that just protects against having to go back and make changes if it happens. We just assume that we won't have it, and then if we do, we'll have a special call for projects.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions from anyone? Would someone like to make a motion on one or the other of those 2 proposed motions?
This is Kate. I move to approve the 2025 Call for Projects Guidebook and the processes outlined within as amended by withholding the Carbon Reduction Program CRP funds.
It's been moved by Kate to do the lower motion as amended. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Who is that?
Maricela in the room.
All right, so it's been moved and seconded to approve the Call for Projects Guidebook as amended. Any board discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion carries unanimously. Aaron, thank you so much for that. All right, I see we have no EDD action items and we have no COG action items. Is there any new business that needs to come before the board this meeting? Seeing none, in the interest of time, instead of going around and asking every director for an update, is there any director that has any update they'd like to share? All right, hearing none then, is there any business that needs to come before this board at this meeting? All right, our next meeting then is Friday, March 20th. And this meeting is adjourned at 11:42. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.